Hello everybody and welcome to this video in which we are dipping into Namco's past. The company has released two packages of classic titles, Volume 1 and Volume 2 in the Namco Museum Archives series. They have just released, they are available on just about everything, including Nintendo Switch, which is the version that I am playing here. And each package has about a dozen games in it from yesteryear. So just to run through them very quickly, in the Namco Museum Archives Volume 1, you get Galaxian, Xevious, Mappy, Dragon Buster, Pac-Man, Dig Dug, The Tower of Druaga, Sky Kid, Dragon Spirit the New Legend, Splatterhouse Wanpaku Graffiti, and Pac-Man Championship Edition, excuse me. In Volume 2, you get Battle City, Pac-Land, Dig Dug 2, Super Xevious, Galaga, Rolling Thunder, Mappy Land, Legacy of the Wizard, Dragon Buster 2, Mendel Palace, and Guplus. So, quite a few of those game names will be familiar to just about everybody who has played video games ever. I mean, I think everybody at this stage knows who Pac-Man is, has probably had some kind of experience with Dig Dug, and probably recognises some of the more niche ones like the Tower of Druaga, Splatterhouse, Mappy, Battle City. These games have been available on just about everything in some form over the years, so even if you weren't around when these games were new, you have probably encountered them in some form, fairly recently. So that's obviously going to be in any package, in any retro package, the developer publisher is going to want to highlight some of its well-known classics, because I guess people pick up these packages for those games first and foremost. But what I found immediately appealing off the bat with the archives is that there are games there that even I am not particularly familiar with and haven't really played before in the past. So we're talking about games like Guplus and Dragon Spirit and Legacy of the Wizard. These are games that even I were not familiar with. If I had played them before, I don't remember them. They're certainly not available on just about every platform like some of the others, like Pac-Man is, for example. You can play Pac-Man on just about everything, but if you wanted to give Mendel Palace a go, you probably haven't had the chance in the past legally without, dipping into ROMs and things like that. So this package is quite appealing because of that. As a statement of history of what Namco has done in the past, you actually get a blend of games, both the really popular ones and the more obscure hits, so you get a chance to see what Namco was really doing back in those days, and that is really appealing. That's immediately a reason that I found this package intriguing and wanted to give it a go. It was a chance to play some games that were new to me as far as retro gaming goes. Now, I really like retro game packages because I grew up playing a lot of these games as a kid, and when a retro game package is well put together, has a good sense of history, and really gives you that feeling that the developers were really careful to recreate the past, those retro packages can feel really good to play. A really good example of that is the Street Fighter one that Capcom put out a couple of years ago, which had art books and all kinds of little bits and pieces to go with a huge collection of Street Fighter games. And individually you could say that a lot of those titles were not different enough to one another, but the fact that they were all there gave you a real sense of everything that Capcom was doing with Street Fighter back when Street Fighter was really the name in arcade games. Another good example is the Castlevania collection, which Konami put out, I think earlier this year, or was it maybe late last year? Either way, the Castlevania collection is really good. It's a very focused collection, of course, it's just the Castlevania titles, but you get a game that was never released in English, in Kid Dracula, and it gave you even emulations of the old Game Boy one of the old Game Boy Castlevanias, and it went right through to the Super NES one, and you got a real sense of that genesis of Castlevania there. It could have perhaps been a little bit more comprehensive because it is missing some titles, but it was a really good cross-section of that series as well. There are some retro collections that don't really appeal to me, and that can be for a couple of reasons. Firstly, if I'm not particularly keen on the actual focus of the game collection, then it might put me off. So a good example of that is I think it's called the Konami Arcade Classics, which was for the most part a bunch of kind of top-down vertical shooters or shmups, like this one, but the whole package was pretty much those, plus for some reason the arcade version of Castlevania, which would have done better in the Castlevania collection. That one just didn't appeal to me because the theme of most of the games didn't. I could appreciate what they did with it, but it didn't really work for me. Another example is the S&K collection, because the S&K games were older for the most part, much older, so we're talking about a really primitive kind of era of arcade titles, and while there were a couple of names in there that I recognise and can still enjoy, there was a lot that really wasn't for me. I think this collection right here, this Namco collection, does a really good job of firstly highlighting what the company really stood for back in these days, but also giving you a really strong variety of stuff to play. So for example, Mendel Palace, which you saw a little bit earlier, that was the one with the tile flipping, which played a little bit like the classic Sega Pingu. That tile flipping game actually came from Game Freak. It must have been a Namco published title back in the day, and it feels different to most of the other games that are on the collection. You've got the side scrollers, which I'm not particularly good at, and you'll see that soon enough when I play one of them down the track. I can't remember the name of it right now. Rolling Thunder, I think. I play Rolling Thunder very poorly, and you'll get to have a laugh at that. But you know, those side scrollers are games that people have a lot of respect for and still love. Also, Splatterhouse is another one. Pac-Man, of course, is another game entirely. Galaga is another very kind of classic arcade title, and this blending of stuff really does a good job in this case of showing what what Namco, the company, represented, and its range of experiences back in these early days. Now, the port was handled by a studio called BB Studios, and they've done a really good job in just about everything that they needed to. It is a little bit disappointing that this game doesn't have art books and musical players and those kinds of little features that give the historical collections a sense of history. But in terms of the actual in-game features and what they've done with them, it's really impressive. There are playback, rewind. There's a rewind function, so if you find a game difficult, you can make it a little bit easier for yourself by undoing mistakes and going back and practicing that way. That's a fairly common feature for these retro compilations, particularly when the games have a habit of being difficult, as they can with the Namco ones. There's also save games, so you can stop midway through, which wasn't the case with a lot of these games. And a lot of the times you'd actually have to keep playing even though you were desperate to stop and go and do something else. A lot of the time you would have to stop when you were playing these original ones, but now you can save, which is a nice quality of life feature. The other thing that is quite neat, and I did mention this earlier, I do like when a developer throws stuff in that we haven't had a chance to experience beforehand. There are 2 games in the compilation, 1 per volume, which had never been released in the West before: Dragon Spirit, The New Legend, and Mappyland. So this is the first time you have had the chance to play those 2 legitimately, legally. If you hadn't before, this is Mappyland right here. Again, not very good at Mappyland, but I do actually enjoy the charm of this game. So yeah, the overall quality of the package is really good. The range of games is really good. The quality of the emulation is excellent. This is one of those top quality compilations that I think a lot of people, not just retro fans, but people who in general appreciate the heritage of video games, will find something to enjoy. Now, with all those positive things, I would like to mention one thing which the developer perhaps could have looked at it in a different way, and that's the choice of the game that they've ported. In a lot of cases, they've chosen the NES version of these video games, and while the NES did a fine job for emulating most of these kind of classic arcade games, it would have been nice to have the arcade version as well. I think a lot of people were kind of expecting that, and we've seen with some other packages you've been able to switch between different versions and play the console version or the arcade version if you prefer. So that does feel like it was a bit of a missed opportunity, but that's not really a problem because all of the games that are in the package are actually all quite playable anyway. So for me, I've got to say my favourite of the lot is probably, I do like Splatterhouse. I know Splatterhouse is these days considered to be not a particularly good side-scrolling brawler thing, but I really like the horror theme of it. the fact that you're playing as a Jason Voorhees looking character. All of those kinds of things really appeal to me as a fan of horror games. So I do like Splatterhouse. I'm also a really big fan of this demake of Pac-Man Championship, Pac-Man Championship Edition. I don't know if that has existed before, as I mentioned before. I haven't experienced it if it was around before, but it's the first time I've had a chance to play it. I have played the original Pac-Man Championship Edition, so the version that was on PlayStation 3 and has been around in various other forms since. I have played that version and I love it, but I really like the effort that they've gone to make the graphics look retro and stuff. That really appeals to me as a retro fan as well. Anyway, that's enough of this video. I just wanted to show these off. I've got a review going up on digitallydownloaded.net as well, so check that out if you'd like. Please do like and subscribe, and if you do enjoy my videos, please consider backing me on Patreon, because doing so really does help me. And you also get visual novels. Don't forget that. By backing me on Patreon, you get all of the visual novels that we create for free as well. Thanks as always. We'll see you at the next video.